Ahead on this week's edition, drought. Is the country damned to perennial droughts and resultant loss of lives and livestock? Also in the program, we stay with recycling, and this time we feature an entrepreneur who's making gas stoves from recycled material. We're also taking your questions on the email address ktnbizweekly@standardmedia.co.ke or the SMS 8040. And at the end of the program, an expert will answer one of the questions you ask right now. Well, good evening and welcome to this edition of KTN Business Weekly. I'm Michael Oyer. At least 20 people have been reported dead following the drought that's ravaging various parts of the country. But the number is estimated to be much higher since the media, non-governmental organizations and the government have not reached some of the affected areas. This is not the first time this is happening in the country, despite gains being made on other fronts. This cannot be acceptable for a country yearning to accord its people middle income status. The irony is that some deaths have been reported in areas less than 100 kilometers from flourishing irrigated farms. Where has the country gone wrong? And how long can this be tolerated? Our feature has more.
The drought situation in northern Kenya and by extension the Horn of Africa region is devastating. Statistics indicate the East African region could be facing its worst famine in close to 6 decades and up to 11 million individuals affected, either directly or indirectly. And as Somali refugees keep flooding into the country, Kenya is continually being positioned into a precarious position. That of straining the limited resources and social amenities as well as food aid to the needy families, especially breastfeeding mothers and their babies. That's not all. The porous Kenyan border with Somalia also faces imminent danger of possibly admitting Somali insurgents. The biting pangs have been particularly severe in Somalia, where about 10,000 people have so far succumbed. This is Kenya's worst nightmare as it struggles to avert the situation, since at least 3.6 million people are said to be under the threat of starvation.
In most parts of Kenya and in the other parts of the region, Somalia, Djibouti, Ethiopia, South Sudan, the rains failed for the last 3 or 4 years, so there was no rain. So as we speak now, what we can call it is not even drought, it is a humanitarian crisis in northern Kenya and in the refugees and in the wider Horn of Africa.
Joseph Devries, the Director of Program for Africa's Seed Systems operating under the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, shares similar sentiments, but further warns that Kenya should not shift focus from solving the situation to sparking off a blame game at the expense of suffering civilians.
At the time of a drought, it's really not the time to ask what can be done to make the country more food secure. These are things that should be an ongoing priority for all of African countries.
In essence, food security exists when all people at all times have access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. But the situation has been elusive under the current circumstances when the nation records unreliable rainfall, making agricultural activities, which are the backbone of economically strong Kenya, an uphill task. The government is on the spot for failure or reluctant manner in which it interprets rainfall patterns that would otherwise go a long way to develop and implement strategic responses to the now seemingly northern Kenya's most recurrent problem. The Kenya Agricultural Research Institute (KARI) is mandated to undertake agricultural research, develop appropriate technologies, package those technologies and offer information to farmers, especially smallholder farmers as well as middle and large-scale farmers, and the KARI director is fully aware of this responsibility.
Our vision really is to see a Kenya that is food secure, to see the agriculture sector being vibrant, commercially oriented, and which is geared towards improving the food security and also improving the livelihoods of the people out there.
However, The institution has not fully lived to that expectation, as this goal and purpose do not go beyond the talk of the institution's strategy documents.
The current drought or the famine going on in the whole of Africa, in Kenya, at the refugee camp, to me is similar to the Rwandan genocide.
Curry has been lacking in implementation of said strategies, and the director cannot agree more, but he says climate change has been a major contributor.
We have programs that now are shifting towards, having drought-tolerant crops in place. A good example is the maize, which we've been working on. We have several programs, maybe 3, addressing issues of suitable maize varieties. One is the water-efficient maize in Africa, which is being done in Katumani. The site is Kiboko.
Local land-raised varieties of seeds are rarely not high-yielding nor sufficiently productive to prevent food scarcity, and hence the solution may lie in developing a wide range of crop varieties that can do well under diverse conditions. Northern Kenya, for instance, is more suitable to sorghum and other drought-tolerant crops. This conveniently spells a brighter future for farmers in northern Kenya, as it represents a safeguard against drought conditions.
The other advantage Kenya has is that there's a large international research community based here in the country, which is actively supporting this kind of research.
But that notwithstanding, DevRis says the complication of getting such seeds to farmers who need them most is that the best supplier is usually not the government nor the non-governmental organizations present. It is the private sector. Yet, there has not been adequate investments in the private seed sector in Kenya to ensure that all farmers have access to these seeds. There are new entrepreneurs coming into this area of investment though, by establishing new seed companies, but they tend to be too few.
And it tends to be quite profitable once people get established. I think that as seed security improves, so will food security, because so many of the new innovations that farmers need to produce food under challenging conditions are embodied in the seed.
Another concern within the agricultural sector, which continues to cause hindrances in the quest for a food-secure country, is the tendency for farmers to cultivate the maize crop despite enormous opportunity that comes with the development and supply of a wide range of improved varieties of crops. The laxity in identifying alternative food crops to be grown in parts of the country, such as drought-prone regions, has since resulted in over 96% of Kenyans relying on maize as a staple food, hence suffering dire consequences in times of famine and hunger.
If you need light somewhere, you must put a lamp post there. We need curry in Turkana, for example. I'm just struggling to get, somewhere where I can operate.
The state parastatal is crying foul for lacking the adequate financial muscle to set up enough research centers in drought-stricken areas so as to determine what food crops can do well in those regions.
This is exactly what we are saying. Because if I had 10, a dozen scientists there, they would be working every day. They would be acquiring the technologies we have elsewhere, adapting to the environments there, and moving the agenda. They would be in close contact with the farmers there. Look at the priorities and inform us who are based here. And therefore, I think these periphery areas require a new arrangement.
The Agricultural Research Director now says Kenya should adopt the use of genetically modified maize as a way of offsetting the current food deficit in the country amidst what he terms fast-growing population.
If you don't move with the technology, you'll be left behind. And at a time when the population is increasing rapidly, the growth in yields, is like 2%. Of maize. Now compare with the growth in population in Kenya, which is now 3% annually.
The population figures compared to the per capita consumption of maize, which is 125 kilograms per capita. In 2009, Kenya imported 16 million bags of maize against a demand of 40 million bags. The deficit has since been growing as rainfall continually becomes unreliable. Mukisira then recommends cutting-edge science and technology, which involves biotechnology.
Even some of the human vaccines have been done through the GMO. And therefore, I would like to actually see a change in perception to give the scientists space so that they can do what they think is right.
But even as millions face imminent danger of starvation, somewhere in Turkana, irrigated agriculture by African Inland Church is at play. Barely 100 kilometers from where thousands are facing starvation.
Go to Sudan, go to Egypt. Those are countries are desert. But today, Sudan produces 60% of the food that is used in the Middle East. They export, so they have surplus.
It is apparent that government ought to introduce and implement a more sustainable economic activity for residents of the northern Kenya region, just like the case is in other regions.
Time for a break now, but when we return, an entrepreneur making gas stoves from recycled metallic waste. That and your question answered on the other side of this break. Stay with KTN Business Weekly.
Waste management has become a competitive economic venture in Kenya, with many entrepreneurs turning waste materials into a gold mine and generating an income from the same. With many years of vibrant economic activities around Nairobi, which was once the envy of other towns in the country due to its cleanliness, until the late 70s, environmental standards have significantly declined. However, efforts are being made to reclaim its lost glory through various partnerships, groups, and individual projects. Kimani Murugu in Kariobangi is one such entrepreneur who has ventured into recycling of scrap metal. It is in this tiny workshop that it all happens. Scrap metal, which he buys from area dealers, is sorted out ready for melting.
We deal with metal casting, especially we are dealing with the non-ferrous metals. That is metals with the low boiling melting points, like aluminium.
Using waste oil which he buys from mechanics, he pours it into a raised container. The oil drips into the special furnace through a special pipe. Air is further blown in using a special interconnected blower to enhance the burning.
Instead of them pouring that used way, we buy it, their own used way. Then that's what we burn.
Once the aluminium melts, the liquid is poured into special casting masterpieces to develop a mold of Meko gas grill.
That's metal, that's molten metal is the one we scoop, then we pour on the mold cavity, which has the shape of that product we want.
Kimathi chose to produce this product due to gas being the preferred cooking option for most households as opposed to electricity.
These days there are no forests to get the fire hounds. Also the waters in the river are going down. So the only source of energy, these days the bigger percentage source of energy is the gas. So that's why I decided maybe I try the gas side of it. Then I had to identify a product which can go in volumes.
He attributes his success to the Kenya Polytechnic, where he got his training.
After college, I had to seek for some employment. Then I had to work so many places, moving here, to another place. When you feel you are not comfortable, you look for another place. Then there is a time I stayed for almost 2 years without getting any employment. Then I decided to get self-employment. That's how I started. I started a very small workshop. By then I was making some other products like the spacers, which we put on the vehicles to raise the vehicles. Then I ventured on the grills.
With a workforce of 3 permanent employees, they produce up to 300 grills a day. These products are later refined, then sold to the Kenyan market as well as the East African region. As dingy as this workshop may look to be, what comes out of it is truly gold. With each meko retailing at about 200 Kenya shillings each, Kimathi does not only boast of keeping the environment clean, but also generates an average income of 60,000 shillings in a day.
You get the product from the people's needs. So you have to be observative. You observe what people need. Do they need something which is supposed to be made of aluminium? Then that you start your own. There are frying pans made of aluminium. You can make, those are domestic. Still we can make. Products are many.
With around 10 years into the business, Kimathi has made major gains and believes that more can be done to further develop and grow such recycling modules which would directly benefit the youth.
In the market report, the Kenyan economy grew by just shy of 5% in the first quarter of 2011, according to latest figures by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, while the rate of inflation rose to 15.53% in July, up from 14.49% in June. The rate on the 91-day Treasury bill is pegged at 9.18% following the auction on the 25th of July, up from 9% in the previous auction, while the rate on the 182-day and 364-day papers is pegged at 9.85% and 10.22% respectively. The average bank lending rate as at the end of May stood at 13.88%, while the average bank deposit rate at 3.57%. At the Nairobi Stock Exchange, there are 8 stocks currently trading with dividends, with yields ranging from 1.34% at BAT Kenya to 6.09% at Williamson T. Other stocks trading with a dividend are Kenol Kobil, Housing Finance, EGADS, East African Cables, Kenya Airways and Safaricom. On your question answered, Kevin Kamwaro would like to start trading in solar products and, like many budding entrepreneurs, does not know where to begin. He would like any information on solar and wind energy and some guidance on how he can start and where he could find such products.
Kevin, thank you very much for your question. Given the current electricity shortage in the country, the growing demand for modern electricity, for charging cell phones and for lighting, I think it's a great business to be in at the moment. You mentioned your interest in solar and wind. I would start with one, and I would ask myself a few questions. One, if you have a very strong technology background, I would suggest wind. Besides selling systems to businesses and households, wind energy systems also provide continuous revenue from maintenance and service. If you have a limited technical background, then I highly recommend solar, and specifically solar lanterns. Some of the advantages of solar lanterns include the fact that they are affordable, which gives you a very wide market, versatile, which allows for a variety of uses, and very low maintenance, which means you don't have to have a very strong technical background. How do you get started on solar business? I would suggest, one, that you identify your capital base. If you have tens of thousands of dollars, then you should look at importing solar lanterns. If you have a limited amount of capital, then I suggest that you go into retail and work with an importer. Number two is identifying quality brands of solar lanterns. There are 2 resources in the country that you can use to make sure you get the right quality lanterns. One is the World Bank Lighting Africa program, and the second is GIZ, the German Technical Corporation.
Well, that's all we had time for this Wednesday. Let's do it again next week, same time, on another edition of KTN Business Weekly. Do remember you can send us your email to ktnbizweekly@standardmedia.co.ke or a question to 8040 from the entire KTN Business Weekly team. I'm Michael Oyer. Good night for now.